Tina here from Prim Heirloom Designs, and today we're going to talk about doll hair and attaching doll hair, some different ways of doing it, and what basically was some of my favorite ways. And I have a couple of clay, these are Santa heads, a couple of clay ones that I'm going to show you because the techniques are different than for a soft sculpture head. So I'm going to start by just going over some types of wool. So these ones are all sheep wool locks that you can buy. And what you want to look for is ones that, for me, that they come apart easily like this and they don't nest kind of thing. So for me, it's been a lot of trial and error to find. And then also they come in different lengths. So these are really short. So they're not good for necessarily everything, but for beards, they're nice, you know, and also different shades. This one, these ones are longer. I think this might be tease water, if I recall. And so they're nice to work with. Sometimes I'll cut them in half and have them hang over. But you see how sometimes you'll get this kind of a bit in there. So that I'll tend to use to do eyebrows. Now, the one that I really enjoy working with, and this is the one that I use for my Harriets actually, is Tibetan lamb's wool. And I bring it up from the States. It comes on, you can get just the loose wool, but I like it when it comes on the leather backing. So this would be called a plate when you buy it, and it's got all these basically these sections that are sewn together. And so this was a piece of a larger, what you call a plate. And sometimes through it you'll get, see, I've got like some very curly parts there, but over here doesn't have as much curl in it. Then I've got this one that pretty much has all the curl at the end. So you can see how it can get a lot of fun picking what you do. And for this, sometimes, yeah, like you can just decide to use the curly end or use it all the way up to the end. But I like it because off of here, because it doesn't get nested. Like I cut off what I want as I go, and it's a nice kind of straight, orderly lock. And then the other one that I have, this is great. This was given to me. This is like mohair, a goat, and it's super tight kink to it, and it's so much fun to work with. So it's, again, I just cut it off as I need it, and they're interesting because they come in these individual little pieces like that. So my favorite way of attaching the hair to a soft sculpture head, so the soft sculpture heads are made out of fabric, is to needle sculpt them on. And sometimes it'll be a combination of needle sculpting and sewing and / gluing. So I'll start doing the beard, and I can show you a little bit of both, how you do it. I'm going to start with, so you've got the possibility of using a felting tool similar to this, where you've got several needles coming out. I find I like to work with a 36 gauge needle. I find when they get too small, they don't quite grab the hair how I want them to. And this is definitely not considered like delicate felting work. So the other option is, again, this is a 36 gauge, but sometimes I'll just take the needle and I use it like this. Now, when you're going through a head that's been painted like this one, when I paint the heads, I'm careful just to do a single layer, because the more paint you've got on there, the more actually it gets really hard. You hear that noise, right? It's trying to make its way through that paint layer. I've actually broken needles before on some that I've actually, maybe had glue in a spot that I didn't realize it. And I've broken my needle. So this is a nice tool to work with if you're doing a large area. And then this one, sometimes if you can't get into it with that tool, you can get into it with a single. And I always keep plenty of extras around because, they do break sometimes. So I'm going to start by, I'm going to do the beard. And I'm going to come back here and look for some of my slightly longer hair, which I would say is in here. And I like that bit of a curl. So I'm just going to spread that out so I've got access to it. Actually might just weigh this down with those. I'm just going to come in, and this is the same technique I would use for the rovings as well, except the rovings you don't have to cut off, but I gather them and I kind of pull out to get rid of what I can for loose threads. And then on this particular head, I know that I like to do my first layer lined up along here underneath the nose. So I'll kind of start in one corner like that. And I'm going to start with the big tool just to show you, and then you're just going to go through. You're going to try to make sure you don't go all the way through to your hand on the other side, because I've done that before too. You can see how that kind of gets that in there really fast. So the way the felting tool works is it's got these little notches on the needles, and it's grabbing that fiber and it's pulling it through. It's almost nesting it on the back side, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how the look, and it holds it in place. You can always come in and follow up with a smaller tool if you're not sure if it's held in there as much as you want, but that's essentially what you've got, okay? Yeah, on this particular head, I don't worry about too much about how it's looking along this top, because he always gets a mustache across, and that's going to hide this part. And I'm still going to be coming up, once I go across here, I'm going to do another bit of a layer up here over top of the cheeks. And then we'll finish off with the mustache, and then we'll do the hair. And the hair, I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. Okay, so that's my first beard layer. The next layer, I'm going to come in up here. So if you want a fairly straight, we'll say, line, one way to achieve that is if I'm gonna put this hair coming down now the opposite of where I want it to lie in the end, and I'm gonna come across here. I'm coming a bit below, if I can make it through, a bit below where I want my kind of beard line to be. Okay, and now you can flip it. And you see how that's a much tidier look along there. So then I'm probably going to switch, in fact I am going to switch to my single needle and see how I can kind of secure it going this way. All right, and then I'm going to just fill in this little spot. Okay, and I can always come down here and sort of start to kind of move your needle around to get a nice, to kind of keep these from getting tangled up looking. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off the other side like this, and then we're going to come back and do eyebrows and the top of his head, the hair. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've completed the other side of this initial beard. So now we're going to take a moment and we're going to actually head up and work on the hair next. So what I like to do for that is, well, first of all, for this one, if his head's going to be covered, you can basically just needle felt it on as you'd like. You could just do several layers across, and that's great. But I want to show you how you can do it in order to get a part in the middle. And one way is to take some interfacing, and I'm just going to cut a section. And I'm going to take you over to the machine. I'm going to show you how you can sew this to here to some interfacing to end up with a row of hair. So here at the sewing machine, I've got that piece of interfacing here, and I've started to cut sections of, this is the hair that wasn't quite as curly, and all you're going to do is lay it out. The interfacing, if you're to do this without something underneath it, you'll probably get it caught in the bottom of your machine, which would not be a good thing. So I'm just right now using a straight stitch. And as I come up to the next area, I've got my next bundle of hair ready to go. And I'm sticking that underneath it. This is also a great technique for the loose wool, to use it like this. You want to make sure that the end that you're sewing is the cut end of the fiber, so that you end up with those nice natural wisps at the bottom of the hair on the head. And then what I like to do is flip this over and come back in and do another stitch quite close to that first one. And I'll pull this hair firmly back. All right, so I end up with a piece that kind of looks like that. All right, so back here now, we want to pretty much get rid of all of that actual interfacing. So sometimes you can, if it's thin enough, you can almost tear it off like this. A lot of it depends on how thick the interfacing is that you're using. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to show you, this is going to be the bottom bit of hair. So that's why this seam doesn't matter. So I'm going to start it at about that high up, and this lets me just glue it. Now you could also needle felt this directly in place. I just want to show you several different techniques so you can see. Sometimes you just combine or you change depending on what kind of wool you're using, the shape of the head. Some things work better in some cases depending on what you're doing. And this, again, you can either needle felt it down or you can just glue it. And I'll just show you for needle felting. Again, just avoid that. If you've got glue underneath there, it's going to be really hard to needle felt. But this is how else you can get that down. You also don't need to use hot glue. You can use white glue, fabric glue for this. All right, so that's that bottom layer. So to get the part, I'm going to show you that next. All right, so we're going to do what we just did before. Very similar anyways. So I'm going to stick this underneath. Okay, and with this one, I am just going to sew right beside that one, right across again. All right, and again, we're going to try to peel off this interfacing. Alrighty, so you're going to put this piece aside because that's going to be the finishing piece. And we're going to take some of this hair and you're actually going to come past the center. And for this, you can use white glue, but I'm going to show you that on the clay head. So for this one, I'm just going to needle felt it. And I'm not going to be too careful about what it looks like, and you'll see why in the end. It's just important that you come past that center area. Oops. And actually, I'm going to come underneath and do, just because I did have to come past, I'm going to just do a little bit more hair under here. Okay, and I'm going to switch to this, the single felting needle. And just kind of come in here randomly. Hold it down. So this piece, you're going to want to put this direction. So this is your center. So I want to lay my last stitching pretty much over top of that center. So it'll go like that. And I'm going to needle felt that into place. So I'm going to take this piece, the short piece, and I think I'm going to put the glue down first. So the glue is going to go to the one side of where your center part's going to be. So my center part's going to be along here. Okay, the whole point is that afterwards, this is going to flip out like that to give you your center part. So right now we're just going to glue that in place. And I might add a bit more glue underneath this area. Okay, and then you can carefully already peel it back over. You can see how you've got like a bit of a part. Now I was off by a bit, as I can see here. So I'm going to see if I can move that already over, which I can. So if you know, try to keep to that center line with lining it up, and before everything dries, you do have some ability to shift and move things around. So I'm going to come back in here and throw some glue underneath. I'm being pretty generous. I know that this glue dries clear, so I'm not too worried about it. It is getting a little bit tangled. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to flip that over. And hold it down, and you can see I do need more glue, so I'm just going to keep going with that. Okay, so you get the idea of where I'm going with that. So you can see I was a little bit off with my part, but that's the technique, is to get one side put on, overlapping that center where you want your part to be, I should say, because you may want to do it off center, right? And then the next step is to take some roving, and you don't have to pre-sew it together. And that's what I'll show you on the clay one, is you can work with just little sections on it. And then sometimes you do have to add a bit. This back of the head's pretty nicely covered, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then if you need to come in to needle felt some of this down in place, again, just bear in mind, if it's really hard to needle felt it through, it's likely that you're over top of an area of glue, so don't try to force it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is the mustache. So for the mustache, what I usually do is I will take 2 sections of wool. So that one's cut, and then I'm going to cut a similar size piece. I'm going to put them over like that, so they end up with kind of the same thickness at the end. And I'll try to kind of twist and kind of create a bit of a mustache look. Like that. And I try to find the even middle. Okay, and then you're just going to, I like to twist it a little bit and hopefully be in the middle. And then this one, I find it best just to use a single felting needle, and I just try to do it along the center. And it does take quite a few pokes to get that nicely and secure in there. But if you kind of keep to the center, you end up with like this nice kind of parting line, which looks very natural for a mustache. So you can see that there. So that's coming out nicely. All right, he's looking a little wild, and he still needs eyebrows. So and when you see, if you've got a little, you know, you can see that part, just pull this hair over top and needle felt in place. These are the kind of finishing things I do once I get the head. In fact, normally I don't put hair on until I've got the head on the body, but this works just fine. So I'm going to take just such a small bit of roving. You don't need a lot. Like that might even be enough for 2 eyebrows, and I'm just going to roll it together. And yeah, that's definitely enough for 2. Basically just trying to just form 2 as equally as you can get eyebrows. Okay, those are pretty good. And then for placement, I just kind of guess, and I'm going to use my single needle for this one. And you kind of have to move it around. Sometimes I kind of have to push the wool in the direction that you want it to go. Before I go too far, I like to get the second one on so I've got the placement, and then you can kind of tune the shaping a bit. So if you want them down a little, which I do, I want them closer to his eyes. Okay, something like that. I'm probably going to end up giving him a little bit more cheek color, and other than that, though, I'm really happy with how this hair came out. And actually, I might go ahead afterwards and add a little bit more in this front, because I should have come straight up to there with this side. So anyways, the next one I want to show you is to do this with a clay head. Okay, so looking at the clay head, there really is no option but to glue it, and that's okay. So hey, you could sew it first, like what we've got here, and do the similar techniques where you're going to put maybe one piece underneath it, and then put the other one over top, and then fold it over, and just do that all by gluing. Or you can glue little sections on. I've seen people use white glue. I kind of have problems with it. So I'm going to start off with my glue gun. And again, you're going to be cutting sections. You're going to be gluing it. So I'm going to start partway down again. I always tend to grab too much at once, and so then I have to go back and add more glue. So I'll go for a little smaller piece this time. Again, this one's going to get a mustache, so I'm not going to worry about up in that area. Now when I do my next layer above here, I take it and I kind of twist the raw edge together before I glue it. Put it together, and if it comes to a point, I'll cut that off. It's got like a little, like a lock almost. And I'll just glue that on. And then cut off that kind of strand that comes, and then you're going to focus on gluing that upper little area. It just gives it a really nice and clean look. Okay, so I've got the two cheeks done, and I'm going to come back and tackle that mustache. I'm going to try to grab some of my curlier locks here. So what I'm going to do here is a similar technique to what we do on the head. So I'm going to put some glue just on the one side where I want that mustache. And I'm going to sink this into that glue. And then I'm going to end up pulling back on myself. So I'm going to put a little more underneath here. Pull back. In order to again get that mustache going. And then I'll do the same to the other side. The trick is finding out how big of a piece I was just using. So this should be good. So again, I'm going to glue on this side. And try to use your nail. If you don't have one, you can even use your awl. So you know where that line is. That's right under the nose. And then that part will flip over back onto this side. So next we'll move up onto the hair. And I'm going to try to use up some of these last little pieces I'd had. So actually I need to go around this back part first. All right, and then do that same thing with having the hair and gluing it just past that center point. Back here, I'm just going to glue some across just to cover in that area. And I want that thicker, so I'm actually going to do a bit more underneath. So if I look just on this side, that's looking really good. All right, I'm just going to throw a little bit more at that back. It's not bald at the back. And here you could have done another row of the sewn stuff, or just stick it on like what I'm doing. Okay, and let's see if I can line this up better than I did on the other one. So it's going to be here and then flopping over. It is going to be thicker looking, so let's see if that's going to bother me. So I'm going to go put the glue to this side of the center. Okay, and you can tell that I'm a lot thicker on this side than this side, so I'm just going to come back in. A lot of this is just kind of trial and error, and I'm going to come back in with this last little piece that I have still, and I'm going to fill that in. So I'm going to glue this side and then come back on myself. So this will just go in here. And come back. If you find that you've got a gap there, I can just press it in a bit because my glue's still there. And I've got a strand. I'm going to glue this back. And that's starting to look a lot better. You may find you need to use hairspray sometimes to style this afterwards. Okay, so then if you end up with a little spot like what I have, right there where my hairline isn't meeting up, I'm just going to fill that in very easily. A little bit of glue in there. Just facing the opposite way of what I want it to fit, and then I'm going to use my awl just to hold it down. Okay, and now that's meeting up a lot better. Okay, and then the last thing on him are his eyebrows. And those are the easiest thing because they're just glued on. So we're going to do like on the other figure where sometimes, actually I'll show you another way, is I'll make like one big sort of log of hair. That feels about the same thickness all the way around. And then from here, I'll try to divide it into 2 equal pieces as well as I can. And I'll roll those and see how they're looking. Okay, and I think I want them a little longer than what I've got, so you can pull on it. That one started to come apart, and just roll them again. Alrighty, and then you can kind of have a look how that's looking. And I do like those nice bushy eyebrows. So I'm just going to add a bit of glue. So I'm going to have to clean up this glue gun once I'm done. Ooh, it's a bit of a messy task. I'll tend to like work on a bunch of heads at once, and then they're kind of ready to go. Get a better shape. I like that. And a nice way to finish off this hair is to use some unscented hairspray. It will help you be able to shape it a bit more. It'll keep the fibers from continually coming out on you. And a lot of the flyaways will get a little bit better tamed. So this is kind of cool how this worked out. I like how the mouth, there's just like a hint of a mouth under there, which is kind of what I was going for. And I may afterwards, depending on which kind of Santa I put this on, I have a feeling he'll probably have a hat anyway, so I'm not going to worry too much about the length of the hair at the back. But all those should be considerations when you're deciding on how you're attaching the hair, how long to have it. You know, is he going to have a hood? Sometimes if he's going to have a hood, I don't even bother putting hair back here because it's just going to add bulk and waste, because the sheep hair is not always it's not exactly inexpensive. So that's the version with the clay head. And these are the two types. And again, you can use any sort of sheep wool or goat hair, viscous fiber. These techniques will work for all of them. Okay? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked this video, please hit the subscribe button below and the like button so that YouTube knows that you liked my video and they'll send more people here. Until next time, happy crafting.